It's Tri-City Sports Now. I'm Marky Billson. And just something saw the transaction list from yesterday. This means probably very little to anyone unless you're absolutely obsessed with Dan Kilgore trying to make the Miami Dolphins. And then you start wondering who his teammates will be. Well, there's a linebacker for him named Mike Hull, Miami Dolphins, and he was just put on the physically unable to perform list. And the only reason why this is interesting to me is that I saw Mike Hull play in high school at Canon-McMillan. It was one of those places they had a big scoreboard, a message board sort of thing. And linebacker, NFL, who was playing running back for his high school team. And whenever he made a big gain, the scoreboard would post the message, "Hull of a run." Later became one of the great Penn State linebackers, but that might not be enough for the NFL because he's been with the Dolphins since 2015, now on a physically unable to perform list, and all during that time, since 2015, he's made 70 tackles, so Mike Hull on there. Anyway, speaking of football, a couple of things here I wanted to mention. NC State, I've often said that NC State, in my opinion, is the college football program in the state of North Carolina. Some Appalachian State fans might disagree. I've also said that if I was going to go anywhere at all to play quarterback in college football, I'd go to Duke. I think that strong academic universities have a tradition of producing some pretty fair to middling quarterbacks, or should we at least say NFL quarterbacks. Now, not all of these guys will be stars, but, a Ryan Fitzpatrick from Harvard, an RG3 from Baylor, Jay Cutler from, Vanderbilt, and for that matter, this guy Jones from Duke this past year is drafted by the Giants. You really want to go back to Duke, you can talk about Sonny Jurgensen and Ace Parker, although that is a long time ago. Anyway, I'd play an ACC schedule. Wouldn't have a big fan base, but so what? It's not really what I'm there for. I mean, I have to hear the cheers of 80,000 people instead of 20,000. Is that big of a deal? Okay. So I've mentioned that. In Appalachian State. I've also said that I think Wake Forest should win more because of the size of their campus. I've toured their facilities. It's state of the art. Small campus where you get to know everybody. And in a fairly, decent sized city. It's not New York, but it's not dinky poo either. You're not going to grow bored of boredom in some, small college town. If you go to Winston-Salem, why doesn't Wake Forest win more in football? That really makes it a little bit difficult than North Carolina to compete. Yet, But I've often said that NC State, at least in modern times, is the football school of North Carolina, state of. Now, the NC State football account on Twitter last week showed a video. No surprise there. Ball player by the name of Laurel Murchison. And he rolled up to training camp back on August 1 in a Rolls. That's right, Rolls Royce. Boy, you really want to get the NCAA looking at you. You want to get the compliance directors at, And they say, the Wolfpack's basketball program is in, this idea of were they paying to get recruits and, going through sneaker deals and all that. So did this send the right kind of message? That's the question there. Now, NC State said, well, we were making a parody out of, Jalen Ramsey. We'll talk to Vito Stellino tomorrow, by the way, about this. Showing up at Jacksonville Jaguars training camp in an armored truck. This is not that unusual. Like I said, back in the day, Ted Hendricks once went to Raiders camp on horseback. It's not, unheard of for thing, it's something to do. Okay, I don't mind the creativity. Then NC State also said they're going to show the parody. Another ball player, for instance, after Murchison arrived in a Rolls Royce. Well, they got another ball player showing up on a pogo stick. Another one in a fire truck. Well, there you go. Here's the deal, though. Is NC State trying a little too hard? That's the question. Now, the Rolls Royce thing, that's, like I said, that's going to get the compliance director's antenna up. That's going to get the NCAA to maybe make a visit just to see if everything's okay with that football program while we're investigating your basketball program, NC State. I have covered college football. I do know of the stories. I mean, I suppose that Brian Bosworth famously drove a Corvette back in the 80s when he was at Oklahoma, or at least he was photographed with one, all the, you know. I also know from covering, the University of Pittsburgh, 2003, when Larry Fitzgerald was there, and I would see the players' parking lot, and I'm not going to say that I never saw a late model car, but it sort of seemed to be like what you might give your son for a high school graduation gift, if it was a nice car. And they were few and far between. And while Larry Fitzgerald got suits from Chris Carter, his uncle Chris used to say, because he knew him from being a ball boy with the Minnesota Vikings, it wasn't necessarily as if this guy was driving in, in a late model sports car, or Humvees were all the rage in 2003, if you can believe it, and, that sort of thing. That wasn't it. There were a lot of secondhand Ford Tauruses in that Pitt Panthers parking lot. Trust me on that. And when you started to see the expensive cars in the players' lot, that's when I think a lot of compliance directors and the NCAA really started to say, what's going on here at Big Time Football U? So that's where, call it a parody if you want, but that's just a little bit, was it the wisest thing to do? That being said, times change. And also, I got to say this. I'm not big on, you can do this in the pros, but you can't do this in college. I'll give you an example. Years ago, the Miami Hurricanes were heavily criticized because they wore combat fatigues before they were playing in a national championship, in a game for the national championship against Penn State. It was the last national title Penn State won. It was back in '86. Game was actually played January 3rd, 1987. Okay, and this was to show that they were ready for battle, and it added to the exposure of bad boy U with the Miami Hurricanes, I suppose. Here's the thing, though. Just 3 years before, I think it was, maybe it was 4, the Washington Redskins showed up for the Super Bowl against the Miami Dolphins. Maybe the Hurricanes learned it from this by wearing, you guessed it, combat fatigues. I was told, that's different. That's pro. This is college. I mean, I will say it's different if I do see a lot of Mercedes-Benzes in the players' lot in college where I see them in the NFL. I'll give you that. But I'm not sure that wearing fatigues to a ball game to show that you're ready for battle, for a championship. If you can do that in the pros, I kind of think you should be able to do that in college, and in high school, and in Pee-wee, for that matter. Just a thought. Well, mentioning I wanted to talk more about MMA, UFC, because I know it's growing leaps and bounds, and I really haven't, when I first saw this, when it first started breaking out, I saw it, and, I'm traditional. I'm like, look, I got football to watch. I want to learn more about NASCAR and hockey. I want to be able to watch baseball. I want my traditional sports, It's easy to follow a team when it's named after your city or your state. Oh yeah, it really is. When it plays locally. It's one of the things I've never quite understood about individual sports. How do you determine you're going to root for that individual? Generally speaking, I think you like the personality. There's some sort of flair right there. But if you like somebody just because they win, that's hopping on a bandwagon. I never really, considered that. I do understand that since in the Tri-Cities we don't have the geographic tie to a pro team, that, somebody who, let's say, starts following football in, what's a losing football? Cleveland, let's say. Okay, you go to Cleveland, you're probably going to root for the Browns. Why? Because the Browns play there. Right? If you decide you're going to root for another team, you're Judas. If you live in Cleveland. Around here, there's no real geographic tie. I mean, there's the Titans. But we've gone through this before. Once you get the Tri-Cities, it's not Nashville. So our signal goes in North Carolina. You got the Panthers. But Boone might be in the Charlotte TV market. Still a long way from Boone to Charlotte, that sort of thing. Anyway, so who do you root for in all this? Well, maybe you want to try, maybe the fighter is from your hometown. Maybe there's something you like about him personally. I guess, and I know this is staged, but the other day opened up the show with Scotland the Brave, because it was the 4th anniversary of the day Roddy Piper died. Why did I like Roddy Piper? Because he was Roddy Piper. Because, this is pro wrestling, I get it. But you liked his personality. A lot of people, I think, were that way with Muhammad Ali. I wonder if a lot of people were like that with Mike Tyson, which is a little disturbing. There are those that will tell you the same thing about Muhammad Ali. Why was it that people revolted against Sonny Liston back when? Well, he's been arrested 19 times. He's done time for armed robbery. We can't root for him. That was the deal. So how do you root for the... Well, what about political affiliation? Maybe that's why, I've talked about this before. The NBA is now very political. It's very leftist political. But it'll get a very strong reaction and perhaps support from people of a liberal political persuasion. Conservatives, maybe they're not going to feel comfortable. If Greg Popovich is going on and on about how terrible the guy you voted for is, maybe you're not going to relate to Greg Popovich. And I guess that's what's going on now with UFC, because Colby Covington has clashed with the UFC champion Kamaru Usman. On Saturday, Donald Trump actually tweeted out his support of Colby Covington before his bout. Fight hard tonight, Colby. You're a real champ. And they have a relationship. Evidently, this is the UFC welterweight title. Well, my goodness. You know what the circumstance is now. If Donald Trump likes you, my, oh my. And this actually has been somewhat controversial. Now, the interesting thing here is that Colby Covington says he's truly inspired by the Trump support following his dominant victory and such. Okay, interesting. That might be something, if the NBA wants to get political on that side, could conservatives follow Colby Covington and the UFC? Just something to think about. All right, tomorrow's show. And it'll be on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio, both over the air, jetbroadcasting.live, as well as the Facebook Live page for 1420 WEMB. Want to tell you that we will be talking to Vito Stellino at 12:30. NFL reporter. He votes on the Hall of Fame. He covers, he's in retirement, but he still has this blog, VitoStolino.com. He's been writing and covering the NFL forever. And he's down there in Jacksonville, so we'll have a lot of takes on the AFC South and, of course, Ramsey and the Jaguars and all that. Then at 1:30, local boy comes home. It's Jack Stallard from Irwin, Tennessee. Now the sports editor in Longview, Texas, at the paper over there.
NEW